Welcome to Trip Notes, a New Zealand Herald travel podcast brought to you by House of Travel, Better Together. I'm Stephanie Holmes. I'm the travel editor for the Herald. Thank you for joining us. This week, I want to let you know that we're doing something a little bit different. We have a competition. So you can be in to win a $2,000 House of Travel voucher just by listening to this podcast. It's so easy. I'll be dropping in a bit of a keyword at some point in the episode. And when you hear that keyword, you can go to nzherald.co.nz/win to be in to win that $2,000 voucher, which sounds amazing. But we'll get to that later. First, I want to introduce my guest host. I've got Maggie Wicks, who's the deputy travel editor for the Herald. Hi, Maggie.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you. I mean, we've just moved from our desks outside the studio into the studio, so we haven't really, gone too far, but that's all good. I've got a fun fact about Maggie. You used to be a tour leader in Italy, taking Aussies and Kiwis and Brits.
And the occasional Canadian around Italy and sometimes up to France. And
amazing.
Yeah.
Well, we'll talk a bit more about that later. Can you tell me what your favourite destination is?
It is probably France, for the history, for the architecture, for the culture of food, for the number of times I visited and never got sick of it.
Amazing.
And I miss it.
Okay, we'll talk more about that later as well. But our special guest is writer, presenter, chef, and just all-round travel inspiration, Peta Mathias. Welcome.
Hello,
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
How are
Thanks
you?
for having me. I'm great.
Yeah, you look
Thank
amazing.
you.
So bright
Yeah.
and beautiful.
Yes, makeup.
It's our friend. And so you are my travel inspiration because you spend half the year in New Zealand and the other half in Uzès, is that the
Yeah,
right way to say
that's
it?
right, very
Uzès, in a small town in southern France.
Yeah.
And you also lead tours in India, Morocco, Italy, Vietnam, Spain and France.
Portugal.
And Portugal.
I just added Portugal.
Amazing.
Another one of my unknown destinations.
It seems to me you've just got the dream life.
Well, I set it up quite a long time ago. I decided that if you have the brains God gave gravel, you should turn what you love doing into a job and then you'll never have to work again.
Yeah.
And fortunately, I figured that out a while ago. And fortunately, I'm able to travel. Not everyone is able to have the life I have. And so I did it. And the living half the year in France and half the year here was set up slowly. Like that's the first, I used to live in France. I lived in France for 10 years. And then I came back to New Zealand. So I just spent 1 month in France. And then the next year I spent 2 months. And I had it in my head all along, I'm aiming for 6 months. And so anyone who's thinking of doing that life and thinks that would be great, don't jump into it madly. Do it bit by bit because it gives you the courage and the connections to keep doing it.
So that's how we can start.
Yeah.
Just 1 month
Yeah,
at a
are you
time.
listening, girls?
Yeah, taking notes. Yeah, that is my dream. You've got a new book out.
I do.
Eat Your Heart Out, looking at love stories from around the world.
Really unusual, weird
yeah.
love stories.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it incorporates your 3 favourite things. Well, I read that these are your 3 favourite things: food, love and travel.
Yeah, that would be right.
Yeah.
But the stories, I chose them, they're not made up. It's not fiction. But they are unusual and probably most of them people haven't heard of. And they quite a few of them end quite badly. But then the great love stories do. Think of Romeo and Juliet.
Yeah.
Some of them end happily.
Where did you find all these stories? You picked them up?
Endless
over the years?
research. I did a huge amount of research. My publisher, Harriet Allen, at Penguin Random did a lot of research with me, and we came up, she just kept sending me all these weird stories. And also I put messages up on Facebook and Instagram asking my followers if they knew of really unusual, fabulous love stories.
They're really
And so-
from all over the world, aren't they?
In the end, I had to really reduce it so that I got it down to, I think, 12.
Right. Yeah. Where did your love of travel first come from? Like, can you pinpoint a moment when you realised that you wanted to travel the world, or has it just kind of always been there, do you think?
I've always been restless. I think I was born a gypsy. My mother was Australian and she came from a big family outside Sydney, and from the age of about 10, I was the eldest of her children. And so I was sent back to Sydney to visit the relatives. very young, like from 10 onwards, I was put on a plane on my own and sent to Sydney to visit the rallies. And I quite liked it. It got me away from my mother so that we had less opportunity to kill each other. And it was exciting. And I think, although, I had no intention of having the life that I've ended up having, no intention whatsoever, my fearlessness might have started from that.
Mm. And you had a big birthday last year. Do you mind
Yes, I turned 70. You're allowed to say the 7 word.
Yeah.
So fabulous. It's not half as bad as I thought it would be.
And so travel for you must have changed a lot since your first time was going away in Sydney and now. What are some of the kind of biggest changes you think?
Travel when I was 10 was like, it was glamorous in those days. I mean, you got dressed up to get on the plane. Mm. And the hosties were, beautifully, everyone just treated you like royalty and there were no wheels on suitcases in those days. So you had porters. There were porters all over airports carrying things for you. And it was, like you didn't need passports to go to lots of places. It was very easy. It was very straightforward. There was hardly any security. It is so different now that it's unrecognizable and it almost ruins it, all the security and the complication of trying to get a visa to get into India is so complicated, but it doesn't put people off, does it?
No,
people are still traveling like mad.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
We've just adjusted to it. We've learned to put up with all the inconveniences.
Yeah. Yeah, I think if you don't travel often or if it's your first trip away, going to an airport can be quite intimidating. And if you're going through security and you're not sure what you have to take out of your bag and what you do, and that can be quite intimidating. And I think as a regular traveller, sometimes I get a bit impatient with these people at security, but you kind of need to take a step back and remember that not everybody does this all the time, that it can be overwhelming for some people.
But also we have to remember the good side. We must be very grateful that we are able to fly anywhere because when I was a child, my grandparents, when they took their trips overseas, sailed.
Yeah.
And in fact, there is a whole school of thought that says we're traveling too fast. We're getting to places too fast. We're having to adjust to another culture, another climate, another time zone, another language, different food too fast. And that, in fact, we should slow down. We should be getting trains and boats more.
Yeah.
And, of course, there's a huge, sustainability impact of flying as well.
It's much harder from New Zealand, though, isn't there? Train travel, not so much an option. Whereas in Europe, they have such an incredible network.
Yeah, they're lucky in Europe. We're not,
Yeah, but I guess we can do some things to help. So we have to fly a long way to get anywhere, but once we're there, we can look at slow travel and getting a train or just staying in one place and really exploring one place rather than zipping around 30 countries in a month. And
I agree.
Yeah.
What is your favourite place to take people on your tours? Is it the places you're more familiar with? Or?
India is probably my favourite tour because it is just so outrageous. I mean, it is just over the top. And it really puts you out of your comfort zone. You want an adventure, go to India because the architecture is amazing, the colours are amazing, the interior decor is amazing, the food is incredibly varied. It's a very old culture and it's very over the top. It's really in your face and you are put right out of your comfort zone. So you feel that you've done something different and that you've understood people in a different way.
Did you love it the first time you went there or did it take you a while to kind of
I had to be talked into going to India.
Right.
No intention of going to either India or Asia.
Yeah.
No interest. We're talking ancient history here. But I first went to Vietnam simply because I was asked to write a book about it. And I said, okay, I didn't really know very much about Vietnam. Now, it's on my tours. In India, I went to India because I was filming with Television New Zealand. And, of course, once I got there, I went, okay. People are afraid to go to India sometimes. So a good way to start, as you will know as a guide, is to go with an organised group. And then you get the confidence to go back on your own.
Yeah. I want to ask both of you, who was not maybe who? Tell us about the worst passenger you've ever had on one of your tours, without naming names. Obviously, we don't want to get sued. I don't have the budget for lawyers.
That's a very tricky one, isn't it?
Or just some of the worst behaviours.
I think so much of tour guiding is finding exactly what your passengers want. So some people want to feel like they're on a trip, but they're still very independent. And other passengers want to feel entirely looked after. They want you to choose their bedroom. They want to know what time you're leaving in the morning. They want to know how many stations there are to go until you reach your destination. So for me, the most difficult thing was finding the balance between what people wanted. You don't want to crowd them and you don't want to leave them alone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a very diplomatic answer without dropping anyone in it.
There's a lot of people management.
I get around all that by having a really detailed schedule. When I first started doing tours, I don't know, when did I first start? 2005? Could that be possible?
Yeah.
I had a general flowery romantic schedule, and my clients were younger in those days. The younger the client is, the less they want to know, the less anxious they are. The older the guest is, the more they need to know. So I've got to the point now where I do extremely detailed itineraries, which immediately makes everybody feel safe, and it's a really good idea. This is how long the bus takes to get to here. We're going to arrive and it's so boring for me to have to do that, but it really is. It's a very calming. People feel secure. They feel that you know what you're doing.
Yeah.
And of course, then you do really have to arrive on time. Because it says so on the schedule.
Yeah. I guess the more detail as well, the fewer annoying questions you get from passengers.
Exactly. I read a riot list of questions people are not allowed to ask, and one of them is, what time do we get there? Shut up, read the schedule, honey.
What a great idea.
Can you tell us a bit about when you lived in Paris? So you were there for
10 years.
Yeah.
I had a restaurant in Paris.
Yeah. What did you love about Paris and what did you loathe about Paris?
Oh, gosh, that's such a big question. What I loved when I first arrived in Paris was the intellectuality of it. You know, I had been living in London for a year, and prior to that I had been living in Canada. And that's kind of a bit like living in New Zealand, but bigger. But France was completely different. You know, the conversations you had with people were so interesting. People were knowledgeable. People didn't ask what you did. They asked who you were. Men flirted with you outrageously. You know, the French are very good at flirting, and it doesn't feel like it's inappropriate. It just feels healthy and happy, and that's what we're all meant to be doing with each other.
Kiwi men, no
So
offense, aren't very good at that, are they? I love you, Kiwi
because
men,
we don't let them.
Yeah, maybe.
But French men are very charming and very suave and very good at that sort of thing without being creepy. So I loved the sensuality of the French Parisians, you know, because Paris is not France, just as Rome is not Italy.
Yeah.
And the intellectuality and the fact that it was just so interesting, and that all the expats who lived in Paris were really interesting people, because you don't come to Paris to study dance or theatre or fashion if you're an average person. You come because it's the best place to come, and you have to work to get there. So I had really interesting friends.
Yeah.
And I married a man. I married a Frenchman.
So I was going to ask, was it a romantic situation being in such a romantic city?
It is. It's a very romantic city, and France is a romantic place in that sense, in the sense of relationships, love relationships. But the man I married wasn't the man that I was in love with. I married him so that I could stay in France. And then the funny thing was that it turned out after the wedding, which was fabulous, I wore a black dress with a red veil.
I would love to see that.
Yeah, I've got the photos. Was it that the French government announced an amnesty for illegal foreign workers, so I could have got papers anyway, but I ended up with a husband, and that was okay too.
And you got to have an amazing wedding and a party.
Wedding.
So why not?
Wedding.
Celebrate your love for the country.
Yeah, but the French, you know, They have the most tourism. I can see why you say France is your favorite country. They have the most tourism in the world, statistically speaking. And so I can see why they get tetchy, because they are overrun in the summer, and they're constantly having people speaking foreign languages to them as if they should understand what they're saying. So I think the French are actually quite fabulous when you see what they have to put up with. But they've got something. They must have something. Otherwise, they wouldn't have the highest tourism in the world. You know, they've got really good wine. They've got really good food. They've got really good fashion. And they've understood how to live, in my opinion.
Yeah, the sense of style of Parisians is just blows me away. Just whatever you wear, you might be walking around in your best outfit, but you just feel like such a frump in Paris because they're just
but we're very casual in New Zealand. But a Parisian woman wouldn't even go to the supermarket without dressing properly and putting makeup on.
Yeah.
You know, they have a sense of pride.
They always have beautiful hair, don't they?
Yeah.
Very clean, beautiful hair. Even if they're just wearing jeans, they always look put together.
And actually Parisian women, I mean, I live in the south, which is completely different, but Parisian women it's quite conservative, their sense of style, but they've got that je ne sais quoi, you know, they know how to kind of, you know, you could have a boring old pair of jeans on and an oversized jumper and feel frumpy, and they'll just say, roll your jeans up, tuck a little bit of your jumper into your pants, put a great big oversized scarf on, some earrings, high heels. You've got to look.
Yeah. Yeah, I need to try a bit harder.
Let's
I think.
follow these rules.
Read my next book.
I will. Yeah, and so let's talk a bit more about the romance of travel, because it is, I don't know, there's just something so exciting and romantic about seeing the world, and it doesn't necessarily have to be about kind of
a sexual romance,
or a love connection
romance,
with a person. It can be just
absolutely
being in love with travel. So for both of you, what are the things you love most about travel?
I always find that travel, particularly if you travel independently, if you go by yourself, you're so open to conversation, you're so open to meeting people. And I would come across romantic experiences all the time, both as a tour guide, because you become such an object of fascination for the people in your group. But when I travel by myself, I would meet men all the time and strike up a conversation and go for these beautiful dinners and have a one-night romance.
Own is that people will be drawn to you.
Yeah.
And I had this technique where I had a little green notebook, because these days it's a laptop or an iPhone, but in the early days it was a little green notebook, and you would be sitting in a restaurant on your own and you'd have your little green notebook, and people would want to know what you were doing and what you were writing. And, of course, a woman travelling on her own is very attractive because, you know that she's going to move on. So there's a downside to it as well. You have to be a little bit careful.
Yeah.
I think they're drawn to the free spirit, aren't they?
Yeah.
You know, they're taking a break from their 9 to 5 for 1 week, and then they see this person who lives their whole life so independently, and they're really drawn to it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess smartphones have kind of changed that dynamic, haven't they? Because I know when I travel by myself, or if I go out for dinner by myself overseas now, or if I'm in a different destination that I don't know very well, I'll just sit and I'll look at my phone and just scroll through, and I might have a chat with people back home on Messenger or something like that. But it means that you're not open to talking to other people.
You're not seeing what's around you.
Yeah. Like in America, I was in Portland and by myself, and Portland's a great destination, but
yes, it is.
I feel like it's better if you're with someone, because the best things to do there are to eat and drink, and there's, as a woman by yourself,
you don't want to go out on your own.
But so I was sitting at lots of bars, and you kind of, in America they set it up quite well that they have seating at bars, so if you are by yourself, you don't feel too kind of.
But then you're sitting at the bar looking at your cell phone, which defeats the whole purpose.
Yeah, I could have been talking to all the bar staff and learning more about the destination.
Yeah.
That's what the barman is there for, isn't he? Like, he's the one person who has to talk to you.
Yeah. I know.
Now there's another challenging job. Being a bartender would be like being a tour host, really.
Yeah.
You have to have a lot of social skills.
Yes. Yeah. Would either of you share with us any exciting holiday romances that you've had?
I'm just trying to
You
think.
don't have to go
because
into
usually
too much detail. As much detail as you like.
when I started traveling, it was mostly because I was either running to or running away from men. And so my romantic experiences of travel are not necessarily that positive.
Okay.
You know, for example, I left everything. I was living in Canada, and I left everything to marry the man I was in love with in London. And this was a relationship that had been going off and on for years and years. And I gave up my house. I gave up my job. I sold all my possessions. I got on the plane. And my friends all said to me, don't do this. He can't be trusted.
Oh, no.
Anyway, so he said, right, you've got to come to London and marry me right now, or this is it. We're never seeing each other again.
That's a red flag.
So when I got there, I know, when I got there, he was, of course, already in bed with someone else.
Oh, no.
So but of course, you know, you do get a lot of pleasure in walking out and saying, kiss my ass on the way out, honey. So, you know, romances can be romantic in a negative way as well as a positive way. But at least you can move on.
Yeah.
I think sometimes there's something a little bit romantic about heartbreak. You wrote a book called Sirocco, and that was the book where I learnt about fado music, which is this beautiful Portuguese music where people,
Very sad.
and all I know about fado, I know from your book, people listen to it in order to feel nostalgic and sad and cry, and I find that so romantic.
Yes, well, us Irish are like that too. We love a sad song. My mother was born in Tipperary, and I grew up singing Irish songs, and the sadder it was, the more I could make people cry while I was singing it, the happier I was. And it's when you love sad songs, it's not really that you want to be negative and unhappy. It's just it's a funny kind of sensual pleasure in a sad song.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we should move on to our destination of the week, but I think we'll put our keyword for our competition as romance. I think that's the perfect word for this episode. So our keyword for the House of Travel competition to win a $2,000 voucher is romance. So go to nzherald.co.nz/win and you can be in to win. But let's talk about Spain. It's our destination of the week. Somewhere that you know very well. I've been quite a bit myself to various parts. Maggie, you've been a little bit as well?
I've been, I'd like to go and do it better. I've been both as a backpacker when I was about 19, back when I was spending not euros but pesetas, I guess.
Yeah.
Gosh, those were
by
the
the
days.
thousands. And then I've been to visit English relatives in a very sort of sexy beast setting. You know, the English who
I know,
have lived there for 10 years and
exactly,
still
yes.
don't take pride in not being able to say hello.
Don't speak one word of Spanish. Yeah.
What place is that? Do you know the name?
Last time I went was a few years ago. It was a place called Mijas.
Oh, okay. I
Down
know
on
that
the
place.
coast.
I've been there.
And there's an authentic experience to be had there for sure, but where we stayed
But
was
not
very
with all
much
the English
a British
people.
enclave.
I will warn you, I am British originally, so just be careful what you say.
Yes, you are too. I can hear a slight little accent there. Spain. Really good food.
The food there is
flavours.
amazing. Yeah.
Really good food.
Yeah.
Probably better than French food. I reckon Italian food and Spanish food are better than French.
The flavours are bolder, aren't they? They go
The
all
flavours
out.
are very, although where I live in the south, of course, the flavours are very bold.
Yeah.
Very, the food is just bursting with sunshine. And my cooking classes in Uzes, where I live, are just famous for their colour and their intense flavour. There's nothing subtle like a béarnaise sauce or anything like that. It's really in your face and it's there to be sexy and to make you happy. And Spain and Italy have that thing as well, that kind of southern sexiness. And they're good places to visit because they like people.
Yeah. My only problem with the food there, though, is that everyone eats dinner so late.
Yes.
I want to go to bed at 9 o'clock.
Well,
sometimes.
no, you don't.
But you can't.
No, that's when you go out.
Yeah, I know. I was in Barcelona with my best friend, and we'd been so busy at work, and it was just this beautiful break away together. She lives in London, I live in New Zealand, and we were just spending this time together. But we wanted to have dinner at 7 o'clock, and have a little wine, and then go to bed.
No, you have your siesta.
Yeah.
Nice big siesta in the afternoon. You get up late. You do everything later than the rest of the world. And it's important to have this siesta because it's a shame to be falling asleep in your soup at dinner if you're on your New Zealand time.
Yeah.
So one of the most important things about traveling is adjusting immediately to the time and the way the people you're visiting live.
Yeah. It's such a dead giveaway as well that you're a tourist if you're out for dinner at 7 o'clock. Who is that person?
Yeah, and the Spanish really do go out at 10 o'clock.
Yeah.
And they take their children, don't
Yes.
they? It's not like babysitters and at home.
No.
Yeah.
Kids are up late.
Yeah. What are some of your favourite places in Spain?
Well, I love the Basque Country. But I wrote a book called Sirocco, which was about the food and music connections or lack of between southern Spain, Portugal and Morocco. And so I haven't visited southern Spain for quite a while, like Seville and all those places. I spend most of my time because I have a tour in the Basque Country, which is up in the north by the Atlantic. And so that's quite different from the rest of Spain because the Basques are Basque. And so when you're in the Basque Country, it's half Spanish and half French. And we go over the border and we spend half the tour on the French side. But in the Basque Country, the people are really Basques who speak Basque, which is an incomprehensible language, almost entirely composed of Zs and Xs, and Spanish. And they really consider themselves to be Basque first and Spanish second. So it's a very unusual culture. Also, they have fabulous food. The Basque Country has the most 3-star restaurants in the world.
Is this where San Sebastian is?
San Sebastian.
I'm dying to go there. Yeah.
The best food in the world.
So what are the flavours of the Basque Country? What do they make?
Well, they're very famous in San Sebastian. They're very famous for their pinchos, which is the word they use for tapas.
Right.
And they're extremely sophisticated. Like, there's a whole area of town where the streets are just filled with pinchos bars, and certain bars specialize in certain things. So the flavors of they're very big on, because it's mountains and it's on the sea, they're very big on meat. They grow meat, cows and sheep and fish.
Yeah.
So big on seafood, a lot of which they eat raw, and big on fabulous meat dishes, and very sophisticated. We're not talking about country cooking here. We're talking about the best cooking in the world. Even, ordinary people have very high expectations.
Yeah.
That sounds wonderful. Do you take people on sort of a bar crawl but for pinchos?
Yeah.
Oh, how wonderful.
God, you just can't drag them away.
Yeah.
I want to go.
I want to go very much.
What are some of your tips for people who might be going to Spain, both of you, independently? Like, what are some things you need to think about in Spain, do you think? I mean, obviously there's
I think it's
have your
always
siesta.
important to try and learn a little bit of the language. Talk about French people sometimes being a bit peeved with visitors. I think if you just made even a little bit of effort,
Hola!
they're so open and welcoming. So I do a little prep before.
Yeah.
Yeah. Get an
Well, if
hola
you're
out.
travelling on your own, is that the question? It's New Zealanders know how to travel because we're so isolated. We've been travelling since we were young because we have to if we want to see anything or go anywhere. We have to go quite a long way to get anywhere. So most people on my tours are really easy to get along with because New Zealanders know how to get along with other people. We're very easy in that way. The Spanish are really friendly. So really I don't have a lot of tips. It's actually quite easy for New Zealanders to visit Europe because things work well in Europe. Trains come on time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there actually are trains. You can get somewhere by a train. Yeah, which we could do with a bit more of.
Not so much.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Yeah, fix our transport system, but we won't go there.
No, that's a whole other podcast. Okay, well, I would talk to you forever about travel, but we need to wrap up. But
no!
I know. We'll have to get you back for another episode because there's so much more to talk about.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And your new book is Eat Your Heart Out, and it's out now, so people
Out
can
now, an all good book.
grab a copy of that. that. Maggie, thank you for sharing some of your experiences as well.
It's really nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, Maggie.
And if you enjoyed this podcast, please rate, review, and subscribe. It helps other people to find us. If you didn't enjoy the podcast, just don't worry about that. Just don't tell anyone. That's fine. If you have been listening to the podcast, you should know that you can go to nzherald.co.nz/trip notes and you can watch video from this episode and from others as well in the season. And we're on Facebook and Instagram as well on NZH Travel for both of those. And we will be back in a fortnight. So we will talk to you then.